Good morning, my brothers and sisters. Welcome to episode number 155. Let's be man enough or woman enough to change your mind. So join me today. We're going to go back to the foot of the cross as we've been for a little while and watch someone do the hardest thing in the world, which is to change your mind. We find someone change their mind at the cross. We're going to start in John 19, then we're going to go to Mark 15. There's this verse 31, John 19:31. Since it was the day of preparation, and so that the bodies would not remain on the cross on the Sabbath, for the Sabbath was the high day, the Jews asked Pilate that their legs might be broken and that they might be taken away. So the soldiers came and broke the legs of the first and of the other who had been crucified with him. But when they came to Jesus and saw that he was already dead, they did not break his legs. But one of the soldiers pierced his side with a spear, and at once there came out blood and water. He who saw it, talking about John, has borne witness. His testimony is true, and he knows that he is telling the truth, that you also may believe. Kind of the whole purpose of John. For these things took place that the scripture might be fulfilled. Not one of his bones will be broken. And again, another scripture says, they will look on him who they have pierced. And we're going to look at the guy who was looking at Jesus in a second here. So just imagine the Jews here and being so concerned ceremonially that they don't want to sully their high holy day. And when you're in the light, in the shadow, when your people have just committed the greatest injustice that the world has ever seen. So talk about missing the forest for the trees. You know, perhaps they still felt as they had done nothing wrong, that this was justified, even a righteous act. They went to the cross and didn't change their minds. But listen here, and we're going to hear of one who is going to change his mind in a second. So we're going to see prophecy fulfillment in this scripture. We saw it already. They divided my garments. That's in Psalm 23 and 22. I thirst. That's in Psalm 69. Not one of his bones will be broken. That's in Psalm 34. And then here, look on him. They will look on him who they have pierced. And that's from Zechariah chapter 12. The question is, what will you do after you look on him on the cross? So we're in this crucifixion acceleration process to kind of move things along before the Sabbath. Remember, to exhale, one needed to push themselves up with your arms and your legs to exhale, and then to inhale, you would hang down on the cross. And this resulted in this cycle of particular torture for one who had been scourged. So his back was already filleted open with dozens, if not hundreds, of lacerations. So to accelerate asphyxiation, if you broke a person's legs, you couldn't push up with the big muscles, and you'd asphyxiate very quickly. And crucified bodies have actually been found since 1968, again confirming the archaeological accuracy of Scripture. So let's now turn to Mark 15 and hear about someone that changes their mind at the cross. So we've already looked at the good thief. He changes his mind at the cross. Actually, remember, he wasn't a good thief. He started out as a bad thief, righteously punished, an insurrectionist who changes his mind next to Jesus. And now we're going to hear of another. This is verse 37 from Mark 15. And Jesus uttered a loud cry and breathed his last. And the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. And when the centurion who stood facing him saw that in this way he breathed his last, he said, truly, this man was the Son of God. In other words, he didn't let the crucifixion go unnoticed. So he'd been watching this righteous person suffer and die, and actually had a hand in it. He heard Jesus specifically say, Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they do, which I think addressed him personally. So here we see the centurion in a come to Jesus moment that lasted maybe 7 hours, notes the way that Jesus died, opposed to all the other people who have died at his hand. Remember, he's an expert, he's a professional, he's experienced. He is in a rank, a centurion, that can only be earned in the Roman army by faithful and successful servant. And of note, parentheses here, all the centurions in the New Testament end up being good examples of faith. All right, John again tells us the purpose of this. So let's get the 40,000 foot view. He who saw this is borne witness. His testimony is true. He knows that he's telling the truth, that you also may believe. So the purpose of all this horror at the cross is that those who come to the foot of the cross, be they a thief or a soldier, would change their minds, believe differently. So we move Jesus in our minds and our hearts and our souls from being a regular guy, a good guy, a moral teacher, to the Son of God, holy, divine. So we interrupt this rescue mission of Jesus to bring you yet another rescue. First the thief, now the centurion. So John's whole gospel is pushing us towards belief. And we see this few hour, maybe 7-hour exposure, watching Jesus die and suffer, watching him bear sin, watching the 3 hours of darkness, having a earthquake and paying attention. He's man enough to take all this in and change his mind. Now, not everybody did. All this could have happened, and their hearts could still not be moved. And ironically, Jesus is going to be swept away really quickly by Joseph of Arimathea. And the centurion didn't waste his exposure to Jesus. So the question is, so he has exposure to Jesus, then the question is, what do you do after your exposure? What do you do after you look? What do you do after you're at the foot of the cross? And many didn't change their mind. He, the centurion, did come to the cross and did change his mind. So let's be like the centurion. Let's stand facing him like it says he does. Let's watch the way that Jesus suffered. That's even when it's unpleasant. Watch the way he acted. Watch the way he spoke. Why watch? Why study? Why do this all to Jesus on the cross? So that we have an opportunity to believe like the centurion. The purpose of seeing is to believe. So let's be man enough, woman enough to change your mind. Come to the cross first, look intently, and change your mind. Let us not let this crucifixion go unnoticed. And then let's ask the big question, what do you do after you look? He did come to the cross. He did change his mind. So we watch today someone who changes his mind at the cross. Let's be man enough to change our mind when we come to the cross. Thanks for listening.